Dang it,
what the heck? I don't know.
Okay, thanks for coming out, guys, and tell your friends that how great it was afterwards, and that we're going to put it up, the video of this on the department website. So anyway, I just want to introduce Scott Mitchell. He's a former he got a master's degree here at BYU, and he got actually an economics bachelor's degree here at BYU. So, and his master's degree didn't really have anything to do with petroleum industry because he was working with me, but he's had a really successful career in the petroleum industry at Anadarko. And he's moved up and up and up to the point now he's in charge of, what, 250 people or so?
More or less.
So,
not exactly, not the right place.
So 8 years into his career, so he's in charge of a lot. So anyway, we thought he would be a good guy to come in and let you guys know what companies like the one he's working for, but this would apply to other types of companies as well, not just the petroleum companies. What they're looking for and how to best prepare to find a career that's satisfying and pays well. So with that, here's Scott Mitchell.
Thanks, Barry. I'll say first off that I'm impressed. Everybody was like front of the class students, so that's good. We didn't have everybody come in and sit directly in the back. I'm also glad that it looks like we got a couple of females in the room. I don't know, are you not a geologist though, or are you? I'm not. Oh well.
The other ones are white.
And the other one's my wife, and the department secretary. So, you know, I'm glad to have this opportunity to talk with you guys. Like Barry mentioned, I got a master's degree here in 2005, which doesn't sound like long ago to me, but it's actually a really long time ago. And Barry asked me to do this, and I'm really excited to do it because I love BYU, and I love the program, and I'm grateful for the opportunities that it's given me. And so I do work for Anadarko, but I'll say that I came here today not as a representative of Anadarko or to sell you guys on Anadarko. Those guys are coming soon. I'm here as a BYU grad who wants to help you guys achieve your goals. So that's kind of the hat that I'm wearing today. So, tell you a little bit about myself first. My BYU experience was great. I loved it. This is me. I don't remember where this is, but it was on 410. I had a great experience here with the faculty, with the students, with the courses. Overall, great experience. Like all good things, it had to come to an end. And as I reached the point where I would be graduating, I had to start looking down the road and planning the rest of my life. Because while it felt like I was going to be at BYU for a long time, maybe even forever, I was actually going to have to move on and do something with the rest of my life. So, here's what I did. I was at BYU, I graduated, I took a job with Anadarko right out of school as a geologist in Houston in 2005, as you can see by the little hammer in the rocks. Anadarko at that time didn't have an office in Denver, but we merged with Kerr-McGee in 2007, in 2006, and they had an office in Denver. At the time, in Houston, I was working on a field that we have up in Wyoming. Well, when the merger happened, we decided that we were going to run all of our stuff in the Rockies out of the Denver office. And so we had an opportunity to take our family and move to Denver, which we did. I'll mention, before I go on, that I do have some recruiting and interviewing experience sprinkled in here. When I went to Houston, I was asked to be on the intern coordination committee, where we mentored the interns through their internships and then helped with the selection process. I moved to Denver and I continued my role as a geologist again, with the rock hammer. And also had an opportunity to come out. I actually recruited formally out here 1 year and at all the Utah schools. And then I've had a lot of experience also hiring people from other companies to work at Anadarko. Last year, the opportunity came up for me to actually move to one of our field locations in Vernal as a production engineering manager, which was obviously not a geology function, but a great opportunity for me to get on the ground in a place doing and seeing everything as it was actually happening and not from a tower, in some city somewhere far away. So I jumped on it, and it's been a great experience. So that is a quick look at my career. One of the cool things about careers are that it gives you a chance to work in different places and see different things. Some do. I've been fortunate in that way. These are two of the places that I worked that I thought were great. Houston, we lived there for about 1.5 years. That's the Anadarko Tower. There's now a second one that they're building right next to it. I think it's almost done. But Houston was cool. It's really hot, but it is, this area is beautiful, and I really like thunderstorms, and Texas has really great thunderstorms, so that's a bonus for there. We moved to Denver. Denver's fantastic. Denver's got 4 seasons, lots of outdoor activities. But I'll say that in both places, and no matter where I've worked with really great people, really smart people. I've had a lot of cool career opportunities, and it's been a cool experience for the family, too. So, but jumping from these two places to now, where I live and work, in Vernal, Utah, right, which I have to admit to you guys is a total system shock for me because I'm a city boy. Before any of this, I grew up in Southern California, and I never lived anywhere as small as Vernal. I tell that to some people, and they're like, "Vernal's huge." Not for me. So anyway, but I've really grown to love the beauty that it has to offer, and kind of the pace that there is, and the job is fantastic. And really, the people that I work with there are some of the best I've worked with anywhere. So I've really enjoyed it. I will make you guys an invitation to come and visit us anytime out there. I recommend January. I don't know if you can see this. This is my dashboard on a January day out in the field, -25. So you might want to bring a light jacket, maybe just a hoodie or something. I don't know where I'm going to next, but it's safe for me to say that it's probably going to be a good experience based on every other experience that I've had. So whatever comes, we're looking forward to it.
Do you have a house, or are you living in a hotel like everyone else?
No, we were fortunate to buy a house and get settled in. We've got everybody, the whole family out there, and it's great. Yeah.
The housing is tight.
The housing is getting very tight out there. Yeah. When we moved out there, we almost had to pay like over $300 for a room at the Holiday Inn Express.
A night.
A night. We decided to sleep on our floor in our new house until our furniture got there. This is my real purpose for being here today, and that's getting you guys to the next step. You find yourselves either now or soon in the future, you're going to find yourself in the position that I was in 2005, looking down the road, trying to achieve some of the goals in your life. And I put a list of things up here, and some of them may apply to you and some of them may not, but I'm guessing that in your future, maybe you see home and family, contributing to charity, making money, pursuing hobbies, achieving career satisfaction, learning as much as you can, or making a big splash in one way or another in the world. Now, it's not the only way to achieve those goals, but one of the ways to achieve those goals is through a career. A career can help you do all of those things. And it doesn't have to be my career, the one that I've chosen, but you need a career of some sort to achieve those things. And I assume you all know that, that's why you're here. But standing between you and that career are recruiters and a bunch of interviews that you're going to have to go through. And recruiters and interviewers have the power to either slam that door shut between you and your potential career, or to get excited about you and throw that door open and guide you through onto your career, into all your dreams. Right? So my goal is to teach you guys some of the things that I've learned so that you can get recruiters on your side so that you can achieve your goals. There's two critical questions in every recruiting process, and the first one is, do I want this position? And the second one is, does the recruiter or the hiring committee, do they want me in this position? And it's a two-way street, and the answer to both questions has to be yes. Because you might really want the job, they don't think you're a good fit, so the answer is no. You might not really care, they might think you're the best candidate in the world, it's still not going to work out. So really we have to answer both of these questions. We have to answer them yes. And I want to talk about each one of them. The first one I want to talk about is, do I want this position? And I think a lot of people think that the appropriate time to answer this question is when you sit down in an interview. And I think it's too late. And I don't think there's any reason to wait to do the research to try and answer this question. And that doesn't mean that you're absolutely going to answer it, but do the research, because the resources are available. You can get on the internet and you can go to company websites and you can pull up presentations and learn all there is to know about the company. Not all there is to know, but a lot of it. The other thing is there's BYU alums all over in the oil and gas industry and in most industries. And there's no reason you can't get on LinkedIn and find them and drop them a note. There's no reason you guys can't connect with me on LinkedIn and give me a phone call. I don't know anybody who wouldn't be willing to spend 30 minutes talking to a student and telling them about their job. So there's no reason you guys can't do a little bit of homework up front when it comes to answering this question. I think there's a few questions I think are useful in helping to find the answer to this question. And stuff like, is the work interesting? Are the people cool? Do I get along with them? Are the office locations acceptable? If you don't want to live in Houston or Denver, Anadarko might not be a great choice. And lastly, do I believe in what the company does? I think that's an important question to ask, because you got to get up and be motivated every day. And if you don't really believe in it, it's hard to get up and get going. So again, let me just reemphasize that this is my expectation when I meet with somebody. Not that they know the answer, but that they've done the research to try to know the answer. If you still don't know, I'm happy to talk about it with you, but it's my expectation that it's done. It's not just bonus points for somebody who's done it. So at this point, we'll just assume for the rest of the talk that you've done your homework and the answer is yes, and that this is the job you want, it's the industry you want to be a part of. And now I'm just going to talk to you about how you get the recruiters on your side. But I have to give you a caveat that the recruiters are all different. We're not all the same, and I can't guarantee you that what I look for is what the next guy looks for. But what I can tell you is just through my experience, a lot of things that I've seen across the board are things that I'm going to share with you. So I think they'll be applicable, but everybody is different. So I can tell you what I think. That's what I'm going to do. So this is what I look for. The first group of things, what I would call the technical foundation. And I put a 25% weighting factor by this. And I kind of boiled it down to the research that you've done, the coursework, and your GPA. I think these are really common questions for people to have. How important are each of these things? We'll go through each of them. The other part I call the critical intangibles, and I put a 75% on these. And these are things that are more difficult to quantify, but every bit as important, I would say even more important, like values, intellectual curiosity, communication skills, and having team focus. And you'll notice the weighting difference, and I'm not saying that the technical skills are less important, because they're not. But you have to realize that everybody we interview for one of these positions has a master's degree or will have a master's degree in geology. So they kind of have the fundamentals taken care of, at least at base. So these intangibles are more differentiating between different students, which is why, in part, why I weight them heavier. So let's talk about first the technical foundation. Let's talk about research. Now I'm going to say that it matters, but it doesn't matter that much. When Barry emailed me, he said, you know, what about the difference between an oily, non-oily thesis? Oily just meaning it has something to do with the petroleum industry, right? And there are benefits to doing an oily thesis. And those are that you really kind of hit the ground running a little bit faster once you start work, because you understand the industry a little bit, you understand the terminology. Also, from a recruiting standpoint, it maybe suggests to me as an interviewer that you are really decided on this being your career, and that's a plus. So then it would follow that there would be some drawbacks to having a non-oily thesis, and there are, but they're not that big a deal. But they're just the opposites of these. Your learning curve is a little bit steeper, and maybe it suggests that when you started, you weren't positive that going into the petroleum industry was what you wanted to do, and there's nothing wrong with that. So, just for your information, this was my thesis. Proton adsorption and desorption on clay mineral surfaces. It's about as non-oily as it gets, right? There was no field work for it. It was all done in the lab and on computers, and that it's not common to have a thesis like that and transition well into the industry. But I really think BYU does such a good job setting up the foundation and the basics that, in my case, that was enough for them to say, yeah, this guy's got, he's got the basics, we're not worried about it. So it matters, but it doesn't matter that much. I think coursework matters. I like to see that you have courses that are related to the industry, because a course isn't a huge commitment, so why wouldn't you? And not just to pad your resume so that people will think, oh, look at all the courses he's taken, but just because it helps answer that question that we had up front about, do I want this job? And you go to a class that's all about the industry and you hate it, then maybe it's not a great fit. So it'll help you answer that question. Again, it builds a recruiter's confidence in you, helps them to know, or to at least have an idea that you're making an informed choice, and that you've got the basic knowledge and understanding. So when I was here, I took as many of those classes as I could, and then as I was preparing for this talk, I went back through the catalog to see what else was on there. And I came across a few other classes that would really kind of pique my interest if I was interviewing somebody. And I put them up here. But geological research, geological communications, data analysis, and then this business careers essentials class. The thing I like about this is that you've got two classes here with the research and the data analysis that are going to help you kind of learn how to solve problems and get into the data and make sense of it. Do that every day. And I was talking before this presentation with Barry, and he was telling me about some of the stuff that they're doing with the MATLAB software. And anything that can get you into the data and making sense of it and solving real problems is really useful. Then you get communications. It's going to help you communicate your ideas and what you've done. And then you've got this business class that's going to help you ultimately add value to the bottom line of a corporation. So these are all things that I think are really useful, and they may be a little bit non-traditional, but I think they'd be worth pursuing. So that's my take on coursework. GPA is a big question. How much is GPA? Does it matter? Does it not matter? I think it matters. I take kind of a threshold approach, though, where I say that my threshold is around 3.25. And this is by no means like hard and fast rule. But this is what I look at, and then I just kind of have a generalized cutoff below that, and I'm thinking, you know, it's gonna be, might be a deal breaker unless there's something else real special. Above that, it keeps the door open. And then I'll say that having a really high GPA is like, it's icing on the cake. I love it. I love to see it, but it still doesn't mean that you're the right person for the job. There's a lot of other things that I want to take into account. So that's my take on GPA. So we talked about the technical foundation. Now I want to talk about these things that are a little bit more difficult to quantify, right? The intangibles. And I want to start out by talking about core values in business. And this is kind of an interesting concept, but companies, they often create what you hear it called like a corporate culture. Really, it's kind of like the vibe or the feel of a company, which you may think companies are just names or buildings, but they're really more than that. You go into a company and it has a certain feel, and the people act a certain way. And in good companies, that doesn't happen by accident, right? That is very much done on purpose. And they do it by creating this culture based on these values. Then they look for employees that are attracted to those values, and they try and get those people in the organization. Here's an example of some real life values. These are the values from Anadarko, and there's 5 of them. Integrity and trust, servant leadership, people and passion, open communication, and commercial focus. And then under each of them, there's a list of behaviors that we will or we will not exhibit when we work for Anadarko. So for example, under people and passion, we will not accept apathy or cynicism. Servant leadership, we will place the success of others above our own. And when a company actually lives the values that they write and does more than just pay lip service to them, it creates this vibe, and it's kind of like a beacon that draws people with similar values to that company. And so the question then ends up being for you guys, what about your values personally? What values are important to you in your life, and what do you exhibit? And do the values that matter to you, are they the same ones that matter to the company? And if they align, then you can potentially have a really good fit on your hands. So as a tip, here's an interview tip. When you sit down with somebody, if you were to sit down with me, I would say, help me understand that you embrace the values that the company stands for. And I would love to hear some experiences that you have with the values or your thoughts on them. For example, it would be really easy to get on the internet, go to Anadarko's website, look up the values, and pick one that you think you're really drawn to. And then find a time in that interview where you're going to talk about that value. Where you're going to say, you know, here's an experience I've had with that value. And then you can pick another one that you think maybe you don't have as much familiarity with, but you think that you'd like to learn a little bit more about it. And you could ask some questions about it. That would be one way to show that you're a good fit. So I want to talk a little bit about intellectual curiosity, and this is an informal definition that I just put up there. But I would define being intellectually curious as having a hungry mind, or just wanting to learn just because. Not because you have to, but because you love to. And I want to tell you a story, and maybe you've heard it before, but it's about Henry Eyring, who is the father of Henry B. Eyring and the nephew of Carl Eyring, who this building is named after. And he was a really famous chemist teaching at Princeton, and his sons were growing up, and he wanted them to be scientists, and had really high hopes for them. And one day, Henry B. Eyring was asking them a question. They were in the basement, and they had a blackboard in their basement. How many of your dads kept a blackboard in the basement to do physics with you when you were young? And he was asking his dad a question about physics. And his dad was up at the blackboard, and he was helping him solve the problem, and he stopped, and he said, "Hal, weren't we working on a problem like this a couple of weeks ago? You don't seem to understand it any better now than you did a few weeks ago. What have you been thinking about? Don't you think about this when you're in the shower, when you're walking down the street? And he had to admit to his dad, no, I don't think of it during those times. And his dad said, I think you should probably get out of physics, because you should do something that when you don't have to be thinking about anything else, when you don't have to be thinking about anything, you think about that. Which I think is kind of the definition of finding something that gives you that hungry mind. What do you just enjoy thinking about? So why does this matter? Recent studies have shown that it's one of 3 pillars of academic performance. It comes along with intelligence and conscientiousness, which is just a measure of effort. But so what this is saying is that you could be really smart and work really hard, just doing the work that your supervisors gave you, and only contribute at a very marginal level for your entire career. Because we don't hire people to do the work that we give them. We hire people to solve problems that we have not solved before. So we need people to be curious and to think of things that we haven't thought of. Because if it was just a matter of assigning the work to somebody, it would be done. It's easy to find somebody to do the work. Some tips on this. This is kind of a hard thing to develop, but I would say that you can develop it, and I would do it by practicing seeing connections, finding connections and seeing patterns between things everywhere. Not just in your schoolwork, but all over. You know, that's my second point up here. Don't limit your curiosity to your field of expertise. And I will tell you, let's see, I'll throw up a tip here. Here's another tip. When you're sitting in an interview, I want your intellectual curiosity to be on display. And even when you're not in an interview, if we're having an informal conversation, I want to hear some of that curiosity. And I'll tell you a story about this. When Anadarko came when I was in my second year of my master's program, one of my good friends, his name is Andy Taylor, and he always comes up here to recruit, or he has for the last several years. And that was like one of his first times that he came. And he had put together a little presentation on the area that he was working, which was out in West Texas. And he was kind of showing this presentation, and he was talking about how they were drilling wells without any drilling mud. And they were doing it just with air. And I thought that was really interesting, because I had always learned that you had to use drilling mud when you drilled a well because it kept the bit cool, and it brought the cuttings up to the surface, and it kept pressure on the reservoir. So I proceeded to ask him a ton of questions about how could you do that, you know? And it had nothing to do with geology. We were talking about drilling, right? And he was answering my questions, and they ended up hiring me, and several months later, he told me that the thing that really convinced him that he wanted to hire me was that I asked so many questions about how they drilled those wells. And so it was, you know, it was an example to me of how just being curious and wanting to know, and having a hungry mind is really important. All right, communication. This is another informal definition. But at its most simple form, communicating with somebody just means you're trying to get them to understand what's in your head. And it's harder to do than you think it is. Why does it matter? Because your ideas, as great as they may be, are useless if they're stuck in your head. Or if you have a really hard time explaining them to other people, you know, it's just not going to translate. And your ideas will go unused. So I'm going to tell a story about this, but I need to invoke 2 very important people to do that. One is Barry Bigmore, and the other is Brad Pitt from the movie A River Runs Through It. Have you guys seen that movie?
Yeah.
Fishing movie. Anyways, aside from the obvious good looks, what do you guys think these two have in common? You wouldn't know, I know. But for me, they both taught me something significant about written communication. And I'll explain it. When I came into the master's program and started working with Barry, my understanding of written communication was like fill up the space on a page. And I remembered something from high school about like a thesis sentence and like supporting sentences and stuff like that, but it was kind of a jumbled mess in my head. Well, when we were working on my thesis, me and Barry would sit in his office for hours, and he would question me about this sentence. Why does this sentence matter? And what are you trying to get out of this sentence? What are you trying? Why are you using this word? And it really made me think about what is it that I'm doing with this written communication. You know, is it helping someone to understand my ideas? So that was very life-changing for me. And then the other thing, it was actually not Brad Pitt, but I couldn't resist putting these two guys up here together. But it's his dad in that movie, and he's teaching these kids how to write. And one of them is upstairs, and he's writing out this essay. And he writes out like 2 pages, and he brings it to his dad. And his dad gets out his red pen, and he starts going through it, marking it up. And he sends it back, and he says, do it again, do it half as long. So the boy goes back upstairs, and he rewrites it on 1 page, and he comes back down, gives it to his dad, same exercise, do it again, half as long. And eventually, what took him 2 pages to try and convey in the beginning, he comes back with a single paragraph, and then his dad lets him go out and play. But that was another important lesson that I learned, was that the best way to communicate with people is to do it clearly and concisely. So, very important skill. Some tips on learning how to be a better communicator. Verbal communication, I would challenge you guys to speak up in classes and in groups, even if it's uncomfortable for you. And then, you can ask my wife about this, she's sitting in the back. Practice explaining your research to non-geologists. My wife has heard a lot about what I do, and it's not always been interesting for her, but it's always been good practice for me. If you can do that, and I think you're really getting to the heart of what it takes. You know, if you can get somebody who doesn't rely on all of the terminology that we use all the time, and really explain it to them in the barest form that you can, then you've done a really good job explaining it. As for written communication, I would say whatever you write, review it really critically, and review it as if you were somebody else who was reading it. And is there any way that the reader could misunderstand what you've written, or that it might confuse them? And if you find something like that, fix it. And honestly, it takes time, and it takes a lot of practice. And I can honestly tell you that there's not a lot more important that will serve you throughout your career, no matter what it is. You know, if you go on to become an academic, you're going to have to write papers. If you work for a company, you're going to have to write papers, you're going to have to write emails, and you have to be able to do it. How about your resume? Is there anything on there that would be confusing? Anything that I might misunderstand as I was going through it? Put yourself in my shoes as you go through it, and see if any of it can be confusing, and then fix it. Presentations are really important. I give so many presentations, so I would encourage you to give as many as you can in your classes. Anytime it comes up, you know, teach something, present something. Study the differences between good and bad presentations. You've seen some that you like, you've seen some that you don't like. What's the difference? One place you can see a lot of really good presentations is at TED.com. Those talks are almost always really well done, and a good example of talks. Watch them and say, why is this good? Why do I like this talk? And try and emulate it with what you do. My interview tip here is that after an interview, I should understand better who you are. Make it easy on me by not making me dig. Just tell me and show me. So my example here that I'll give you is going to an interview with a game plan. If you go to an interview and you don't have a game plan, then all you're going to do is sit down and you're going to react to the questions that I ask you. And I'll be honest with you, I'm not going to leave impressed. You need to come into an interview with a game plan. You need to think about who you are, what some of your characteristics are that I might find valuable. You need to think about how you're going to convey those things to me at some point in that conversation. Doesn't mean that you're going to come in and try and dominate the interview, because I won't like that either. But there are always times in the interview where there's an opportunity to bring up something that you want to bring up. You need to have that game plan and be ready for it. So, and understand how you're going to communicate it and do it effectively. I would also encourage you to practice things out loud. I mean, if you want me to understand something about you in an interview, practice how you would say that. Say it out loud, and it's super awkward, but it's really helpful. Team focus. I say this is putting forth your best effort for the success of the team. And I think that John F. Kennedy hit this on the head, really, when he said, when he coined the phrase, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. And when you get into an interview, you need to take on the attitude, ask not what this company can do for me, ask what I can do for this company. And why is this important? Do you ever look forward to working with someone with a me-first attitude or mentality? Nobody else does either. You go into a group project and you're with somebody who's just looking out for number one, it's miserable. And nobody wants to work with somebody like that. It's as simple as that. Another thing, nobody can do it all in a complex business. I don't care how smart you are. You're never going to know everything so that you can be the one-stop shop, the Superman who can do it all. You're going to have to work with other people. You're going to need their help. And so the best way to deal with that is to return the favor early and often. Help other people out, because what goes around comes around. This is a picture here of our team out in Vernal. Some of them, at least, there's more than that. But it's really interesting because while I'm a manager in this organization, 95% of what these people, 95% of what these people do on a daily basis, I would have no idea how to do. But if they fail at their job, then essentially I failed at my job. So there's this unique experience of, really relying on somebody. Now, if I were to hire you, any of you to work at Anadarko, you then become part of this team, and now everybody in this picture relies in part on you to do your job well so that we can all be successful. So think about the pressure that puts on a recruiter, an interviewer. I really don't want to mess that up by hiring somebody who I don't think will step up when it matters to help our team succeed. This is a very important quality to have in somebody. Developing it, you can definitely develop this too, because I don't think I was especially good at this maybe early on in my life. But you can practice working in groups. And then I would say once you get working in groups, this one's really hard, and it's not going to happen formally, but just informally, start measuring your success, not only by like the grade you get personally out of a group project, but by the grade that everybody else on the team gets. And it'll be something that maybe only you can measure, but if you start to find yourself on teams that fail, but you are the shining star, don't be too proud of yourself. You're better off being a guy who lifts other people up around them. Looking for win-win situations. This is an interesting concept. Most of us tend to think that when someone wins, someone loses, and that everything's a competition. But it is possible and actually more desirable that if this person does a great job, then I also look good, and they look good, and you'll look good, and we'll win. And those scenarios exist out there, and that's the preferable scenario. And the question, what's in it for me? I'm not saying you don't have to not ask this question, because it's important, and you need to know what is in it for you sometimes, but just ask it less frequently. Don't ask it anymore. So here's an interview tip. Your goal should be to make me want you on my team, because I know that you're going to help our team succeed. And one thing I want to warn you guys about, and I think everybody does it innocently, but this is not a good thing to do in an interview, is to sit down in an interview and I say, so what do you like about Anadarko? and you say, well, I really like you guys give a lot of vacation. That's awesome. And it's true. There's a great vacation policy. Essentially what you're telling me is that you like Anadarko because you don't want to work. And what does that make me think, about potentially hiring you? What I would like to hear, instead of saying that, right, say, well, through the research that I've done, I've found out that exploration geologists at Anadarko have a really good track record of success in finding really big oil and gas plays. I want to be the next guy who finds the next big oil and gas play. I want to be on that team. That's a great answer. Or Anadarko, has grown so much over the last few years. You've got to be doing something right. I want to get on that team and make it an even better place than it already is. That's a great answer because you're addressing the question, what can I do for Anadarko? You may have questions about the vacation policy and the benefits and all that stuff, but what I'm telling you is find that stuff out before. Talk to people beforehand. Get it from a presentation or something, like, if you can. Because an interview is a really valuable time, and you'd much rather be, convincing them that you're the right guy for the job, than to be, asking. I want to talk about vacation time. I want to talk about you when we're in an interview. Does that make sense? Another thing I definitely wouldn't mind hearing about, interviews a lot of times become like the me show. Here's what I've done, this is my research, I did this, and I really wouldn't mind hearing about some group projects that you've had, or how working with somebody you guys were able to accomplish something together that maybe you wouldn't have been able to do alone. I just can't really overemphasize how important this team concept is. So, I think that's it for that one. So just to review, here's what you need to demonstrate to me. Technical foundation, again, weighted about 25% because pretty much everybody has it that we're going to interview. Research, oily is good but not critical. Coursework, take the classes if you can. And then hit that 325 threshold. You should really be shooting for that, at least. The critical intangibles, values, intellectual curiosity, communication, and team focus. You can't fake this stuff, you guys. The only choice you have is to use your time here to develop these skills, develop these characteristics. And if you actually develop them and work on them, I'm really confident that when you sit down in an interview or with a recruiter, that it shines through. We can tell. And if you do that, and you can achieve, some of these things, then you're on your way. And I'm really confident that the recruiters, instead of shutting that door on you, are going to open it up and they're going to help you get into the right fit for you, whether that's in a business like I'm in or whether it's in something entirely different. Don't think that the values change all that much from one job to another. This is almost kind of universally applicable stuff. I can tell you that if you work on yourself in that way, you don't try and fake it, you don't try to take any shortcuts, that interviewers and recruiters will be able to tell. So that's all I have for you. You guys have any questions for me? Just open it up for questions. Yeah.
I have a question. Just like you said that you need to know if this job is what you want.
Yeah.
How did you decide this was a career that you wanted to take? Because you said you went into economics and then studied clay,
Yeah.
mineral, and stuff like that. Why did you decide to go into the oil and gas industry? What made you decide to split it for you?
That's a good question. Man, I wasn't really decided even up until the last minute. They offered me a job and I still wasn't sure that that's the direction I wanted to go or if I wanted to try and get a PhD. And I spent some time, I didn't do an internship either, which is kind of unique. So I didn't have that to fall back on and say that I think that this is really what I want to do. But in the time that I had spent down there, which was all of about a day, actually at Anadarko, talking to people, I was really impressed. There's some of those questions that I put on the board. Do I enjoy the work? When people talked to me about what they were doing, I just thought it was fascinating. And everybody I talked to, I liked. I thought I could get along with these people. Can't remember what other question I put up there. Did I believe in it? Yeah, I thought that the oil and gas industry is something important to the world. So ultimately, and the salary was good. I'm not gonna lie. You know, it made a difference. My wife and I, we had just had a daughter, and it was something that I considered. But it wasn't the only thing that I considered. So weighing all those things, and it was still a little bit of a leap of faith, you know? I wasn't like, oh, I know this is gonna make me happy for the rest of my life. It's a little bit of a leap of faith. And in retrospect, I can say, oh, it's worked out fantastic, but at the time, you know, you're kind of taking a step into the unknown. But I've done a lot of research on it too, and compared different industries, and I felt pretty good about it. Yeah?
I understand that some graduate programs are more heavily recruited than others.
Yeah.
I'm curious what makes the difference between different graduate programs?
At Anadarko, that's not really the case. We usually pull like one or two out of each school. You know, in all actuality, I think what really happens is that you get people from a school in a company, and they do well, and then that school is reflected on very well. And so we always pull really good people out of BYU, and they reflect well on BYU, so we always come back. And but I'll be honest with you, there's a lot of people at Anadarko, the University of Texas, Oklahoma, Texas A&M, right? And it's like, man, when I worked in Texas, I got so sick of hearing about the Big 12 on Monday. I was just so tired of it. I was happy to get back to Denver where people were talking about, you know, schools that I actually cared about. But no, I mean, I think that's why. I'm a BYU guy, so, you know, when people talk about recruiting, I'm like, well, what about BYU? What about BYU? So you kind of get those champions for the schools. And those programs at those other schools are huge. You know, I don't know how many, I'm not recruited at those schools, so I don't know, but I think it's like hundreds of students in their graduate programs. So there's a lot to choose from, too. But I will tell you that our best can stand up against their best any day. That's the truth.
Just going along with that, would you say, I guess you haven't recruited there yourself, but as far as maybe the competition goes, you know, even within the department, you know, how would BYU, I don't know if you recruit or not, how would, you know, kind of smaller programs compare?
With the larger
Those
programs?
Larger programs, yeah. Is it,
I think everybody recognizes that you can go into, if you can go into any school and try and get their top, you know, their top tier of candidates, that they can all do the job. You know, I can go into any school and, you know, go and find somebody who's going to be outstanding, whether it's a big program or a small program. And that's universally accepted. I would say that one thing that those other schools have too is that everybody in Texas is going into oil and gas. You know, everybody at Texas A&M is going into oil and gas. So you just walk in and, you know everybody wants a job with you. And here it's not necessarily that way, and the other Utah schools it's not that way. So that's a little bit of a difference too. Yeah.
So, because you mentioned a little bit about like making sure that's what you're wanting to go into or try and look into that.
Right.
If you're kind of on that fence where you're not, I mean, you're interested, but you're not sure that's the direction you want to go, how best to approach that situation with internships and interviews and such like that?
if you're not sure, like I said, I don't mind if you haven't decided, I really don't. But do everything you can to know before you get in that situation, which would include looking up alums in the industry, and calling them, and talking to them, and being really honest about your concerns. I'm not sure if I would like this. I'm not sure if I would like this. And trying to get at it. You know, if you're on the fence, if you truly think it might be something that you want to do and you can get an internship, why wouldn't you? I mean, it's a 3-month trial or a 2-month trial. So that's a great way to approach it. Does that answer your question?
That does, yeah. And then it's kind of related with that then, because you said that you personally, I mean, it doesn't matter to you so much. Would you say that's pretty well held across recruiters that, particularly with internships, if it's not, you're not sure that's what you wanted to go in, that's not going to necessarily hurt your chances of getting that internship?
If there's 2 people and they are exactly equally qualified, and one of them is gung-ho about going into the petroleum industry and the other one is kind of on the fence, then pick the one that's gung-ho. Assuming that they're exactly qualified in every other way. And I think people understand that to come to recruit here. If I were going to Texas A&M, I'd be like, I'm not going to talk to you. There's 200 other people that want to do this, right? But I think people understand that it's a little more nuanced here. But still, it's always better if you're decided than if you're not. But that doesn't mean you have to be. I wasn't. Yeah.
In the industry, when say you're working for Dartmouth, do you have opportunities in the company, or while you're working there, to learn? Like, what further education do you have? Are there conferences? Are there
Oh yeah. Good question.
schooling while you?
Good question. You know, that is one of the reasons that ultimately I decided to go work in this industry, is because I realized that there was enough to learn to last me many lifetimes, and that I would never get to all of it. It's one of the reasons that I've been open to going from a geologist in Denver to a production engineering manager in Vernal, because I love to learn new things. But yeah, when you start, there's like a mandatory 3 weeks a year of training where you go on, you go on field courses, and you can take courses through the company or through third-party, geologic training companies. So there's tons of training opportunities. There's training on other things like leadership type stuff and business skills and things like that. So. And there's a ton of learning on the job. And I can tell you that if there's one thing that would kill a career for me, it would be one that got stagnant and I didn't learn anything. And so, no, I can tell you that that's definitely not the case. Yeah?
Another part is it, once you're hired on, are you pigeonholed for that job, or as you learn more, can you progress up? So I enjoy this part of the aspect of the job. I see what's further over here.
That's the natural order of things, you're not set into something and it's very rigid and this is your career path. And you decided it the first week you got here and you cannot change your mind. I'm not sure anybody would have picked me as a production engineering manager when I started in 2005. So yeah, it's definitely an evolution. You find out things that you have an affinity for, and you just kind of end up going that way. And if you're successful in that, then you get more opportunities along those lines. So it is very dynamic. I saw your hand. Yeah.
Yeah, I was curious. I know it's kind of you have to put it in a nutshell, but just when you got hired and for your first portion you were working with a geologist, what sort of things were you doing in a nutshell?
I've worked, my whole career I've worked onshore U.S. So I've worked fields in Wyoming and I've worked fields in Utah, and that's it. A lot of people are doing stuff offshore, they're doing international stuff, and their experience is probably a lot different than mine. Our onshore fields, it's not like we're drilling wildcat wells and we have no idea what's going to happen, right? We know we're getting something. My job is to go into a field that already has hundreds, if not thousands of wells drilled, and we're spending like $400, $500 million a year drilling new wells, and make sure that we spend that money in the best place. So I mean, we have no shortage of data, right? We've got well logs from thousands of wells. Like, we know what's happening structurally in this play, right? We've got great maps. So what you're doing is you're just high grading locations. You know, this area is going to be slightly better than this area over here. We know we're going to hit everywhere. I mean, we have enough data. So it's all about, at that point, high grading, looking at the data in different ways that other people maybe haven't looked at it, in order to determine and be predictive about where the better spots in the field are. This is where we're going to focus all of our efforts. It really is all about being predictive as a geologist. They pay you to save them from making mistakes and drilling in locations that are not going to be as good. If you're an exploration geologist internationally, they pay you to make mistakes, right? But just occasionally to be successful. And then it's a big deal when you are successful. But I can't really speak to that because I haven't done it. But onshore US where I've worked is just, and this is one of the reasons why I think data analysis courses or courses like the MATLAB stuff that I was talking with Barry about are so valuable, is because they provide a way for you to learn how to work with really big data sets. Because that's what we have. I have more data than I know what to do with. And I have to find a way to sift through it and figure out what the critical drivers are, where are the correlations between geologic properties in the reservoir and ultimate productivity of that well. And it is tough. You think that a lot of data makes things easier, but that's not always the case. So learning to deal with big data is a great skill to have. Yes?
Do you think like diversity, like things such as extracurricular activities, maybe your degree in economics, or like a minor in a different field, is a definite plus, or do you think it's just not a very...
I don't think it's that big a deal. I think that it's interesting, and it might raise some eyebrows, and it might, you know, warrant some additional discussion. But ultimately, if they didn't think I was going to be a good geologist, it wouldn't have mattered that I had a degree in economics. Where they're hiring you for a job, and they want you to be proficient in that job. You know, I put missions into that same category, as like we're kind of talking about that. You know, a mission is a great bonus, but it doesn't necessarily jump off the page at somebody, especially somebody who's not LDS or, you know, you go to BYU and they say that's cool. But you kind of hear these stories about, well, I saw that guy was an Eagle Scout and I decided to hire him on the spot. And I just have never had that experience. You know, or he went on a mission, so I knew it was great. You know, it's definitely cool, but it's not going to get you the job. Yeah.
I had a question along with that. Is there, when you're doing the interviews, is it against the law to bring religion, like, to ask about, like, religious?
For an interviewer to do it,
yeah,
it's illegal.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, but if, you know, you talk about, you know, I served the mission for my church or whatever, they ask some questions about it. You know, that can happen.
We're just kind of the qualities you learn doing that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anybody will ever get into theology.
Yeah.
You believe this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just have one more question. So you mentioned that an example of a good question could be maybe going into the company's website and their values,
Yeah.
asking about values. I think Desmond's questions were pretty good about you know, like what opportunities exist to further your learning once
Yeah.
you're in the company. What are some other examples of questions you're looking for? Because obviously the questions like about vacation or benefits are kind of like at a lower level. It seems like, you know, there's better questions.
I don't mind, yeah, I don't mind answering them, it's just, I feel like it's a waste of time.
Yeah.
Like, I wanna talk about you, right?
Yeah.
So say again your question.
Just what, you know, I guess what would be maybe some other examples of some good questions? To ask in
Okay.
an interview.
You know, it's hard to think of exactly, you know, what's the exact right question or, you know, the exact kind of question. But if I go back through some of these tips, right? Think about this as the end result. As you walk out of the interview, you think, that guy wants to be on his team. That's what you want to be feeling, right? So whatever questions you can come up that help you get to this result, that's what you want. Now let's go back through some of the other ones. I mean, I should understand who you are. So what can you do in that interview so that you leave? Sometimes it's not about the questions, it's about statements that you make by yourself. You know, intellectual curiosity. This is a good one. You guys questions about anything, and I'm going to eat it up, right? You can ask me about, you know, what's your day-to-day? What do you do? What's it like doing that? Do you ever run into this problem? Why does this happen? Why does that happen? I mean, there's no formula of right questions, but these are the end results that you're looking for. Yeah.
I don't have a lot of experience with interviews, but from my past experience, at the end of an interview, I'll ask, do you have any questions for us? So when is a good time, like when is a good opportunity during an interview? I'm sure they're all different. But,
Yeah.
when is a good opportunity? I just feel like the bulk of the interview is taken up by the interviewers asking the interviewee questions. So like, is it normal for it to become conversational?
Yes. It should be conversational, honestly. The one-sided interview is not going that well. The conversational interviews are going really well. It's a great point to bring up. I mean, and that's kind of when I was talking about the game plan. If you go in with things that you want to talk about, you'll find places to say that so that it's not just you reacting to questions. But you know, you say, well, that question makes me think of this. Like, I had this experience, and all of a sudden you're in a conversation rather than an interview, which is really where you want to be. Anything else? These are great questions, guys. Really good.
All right, so let's everybody thank Scott. Oh,
Sorry,
I'm
we
sorry.
have one more.
Sorry, it was
Last question.
Sorry, I was trying to kind of phrase it. So, are there a whole lot of differences between interviewing for an internship and interviewing for a job, from what you're saying? Or if there are, what would a difference be?
I would say that sometimes we might use an interview, an internship on somebody who was not certain about what they wanted to do. And we'd say, well, you know, come try it out. And we think we'll convince you that you love it. That's harder to do with a full-time position. You don't want somebody signing on full-time and then bailing after a couple of months. So that's one difference. Yeah, I think at that point you're just kind of down to commitment level. So, good question. All right, is that it?
All right, so everybody give them big hands then.